Yeah, there's a lot of history of just a little bit off. Yep. Yeah. What's that's funny. I know there's a lot of yeah. Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of what 7 years now. Yeah.
Okay, looks like it's time for us to get going. I'm Rick Matthew. I'm Dean of the McColl School of Business. And welcome, everyone. Great to see you here today for a great Leaders of Action lecture series. This event is hosted by the McColl School of Business and Queen's University of Charlotte. And this is a real opportunity for everyone in attendance to engage with our speakers here today. It's an intimate environment where there's an opportunity for you to learn and interact with our speakers today. So please take advantage of that. Just wanted to remind everybody, if you don't already know, that leadership development is a big part of the McColl School of Business and our programs, our MBA, our MS in Talent and Organization Development, and our undergraduate programs in Accounting, Finance, Management, and Marketing. And I just wanted to let you know that leadership, the university's commitment to leadership has been reinforced under our President Dan Lugo, and you'll continue to see exciting new things happen in the McColl School and at Queen's University around this theme of leadership. And leadership starts with, in the McColl School of Business, starts with Dr. Will Sparks, the Dennis Thompson Chair of Leadership, who is the host for this event. So I'm going to turn it over to Will, and he will kick us off today. Thank you, Will.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Dean Matthew. You could probably hear me without this, but I'll stay close enough anyway. Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to have you with us this evening. Appreciate you spending part of your Wednesday night with us, and really excited about the program that we have tonight and our two exceptional speakers and leaders. And so we're going to get started here in just a moment, but I want to welcome you here. I want to reference and make sure that you have the bios for both Omid Adia and Dr. Pam Oliver. They're on the back of the handout there. And so I'm going to ask them in just a moment to introduce themselves so that we can take full advantage of the time that we have together. You can see here the Omid representing Bank of America, healthcare, investment banking, and Dr. Pam Oliver with Navan Healthcare. And I have just the honor and the privilege of knowing both Amelia and Pam on a personal level, and really appreciate you all being here. So thank you very much. I mean that sincerely, and ready to get started. So let me talk a little bit about the format for what we have this evening. We will have some carefully rehearsed spontaneity in the form of some fireside chat questions, and we will go through those questions, and then we will have about, I don't know, usually 15, 20 minutes for some audience Q&A. So if you're sitting there and you have a question, it can be about anything that we're talking about or what's on your mind, please, hold on to that. We'll have some time toward the end of our program to have those questions for our esteemed panel. And then after this, we do end promptly at 6:30 to honor those of you that have class this evening. But immediately upstairs, we will have a reception that will follow. So if you can join us for that, we would love to have you join us at 6:30 immediately following that. So with that, we're going to get started with our topic today, an update, a COVID update. Where do we go from here? As Dean Matthews said, though, we do have a legacy and an emphasis here on leadership and leadership development. And so I want to start with getting to know our speakers a little bit better. And Pamela, if I can, I'll start with you. I'd like to ask you if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, your journey, where you were raised and went to school, and maybe your first job.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to see you all, and pleasure to be here this evening. So my name is Pam Oliver. I'm from Eastern North Carolina. I was born and raised in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. So I would say it's a rural part of the state. I'm a middle child, so that probably tells you a lot about me. Probably fighting for attention, for a period of time, and got it, where I needed to. What's important to know, a big part of my why, and I think of who I am today, is because of those roots in Eastern North Carolina. My grandparents were farmers, and my parents, did not farm, but we went back every summer from the time I was little through high school to help my grandmother and grandfather on their farm with tobacco, cucumbers, you name it. I mean, their farm or family farm. And that was because that was their livelihood. They were small farmers, and they froze what they, what they grew. So I'd say I started with an organic life that I couldn't appreciate, right? But it really did teach me a sense of community and about looking out for each other. I left Rocky Mount when I was after high school, and I went to UNC Chapel Hill. So I'm a Tar Heel. Great victory on Saturday, I will say, we've been talking about. I majored in biology, and at that point I didn't know I wanted to go into medicine. And so I stayed at UNC for medical school. And while I was there, I did a master's of public health in maternal and child health. By that point, I did know that what I discovered I really liked was women and children's health in general. And that led me to a career in OBGYN. So I met my husband while I was in medical school, and he was in dental school, and we moved to Winston-Salem for my residency at Wake Forest. And I've been there for 20 years, not at Wake Forest, but 4 years of residency there, joined a small private practice. And our practice became part of the Navan Health medical group a few years after I joined it. And so I've been in various leadership roles over the course of my lifetime, to the point now where I have the pleasure of representing our entire physician network, our ambulatory medical group. So that's a great task. It's daunting, 3,000 physicians and APPs across 600 plus clinics, and a very powerful, though purposeful, I think, leadership opportunity for me that I embrace. And the other part you asked is my first job. Oh gosh. I was telling my brother picks on me, he says, gosh, who's 30 and they get their first real job? Because that's our medical career. I mean, you work, I didn't have high school jobs. I did, however, before I was officially a doctor as my first real job, I spent a summer working as a rental agent at the apartment complex that I lived in when I was in undergrad. And so I thought I was doing something. I mean, it was just a summer job. And then, unfortunately, it is true, my first real paycheck was probably as a physician.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Pam. I have been asked by Jane if we can use the microphones. We have
For the
live
watch screen, I'm sorry.
We were live streaming, and so I apologize for that. So that way they can hear us.
Okay. Oh, right up on it. I hear you now. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you both.
All right. Okay, so we will be sure to access these. So Amit, let me ask you the same question. Maybe if you could start a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born and raised, your journey up to this point, and your first job as well.
Sure. So I was born in Iran. That's where my family's from. That's where I was born. We left when we were pretty young in the 70s and moved to New York. My dad, who's a physician, retired now, but did his residency in New York at Mount Sinai Hospital there. And when he finished up, they, as part of the program, you try to find where you're going to go practice. And there was a small rural town in North Carolina called Hamlet, North Carolina, which is where we moved, which is about 2.5 hours from Charlotte, the east. And we moved to this small rural town, family of Persians, in a small town that, was not necessarily all accepting of foreigners, is probably the best way to put it. We lived there, and he was the only pediatrician in the county, actually, for many years. I got a very similar experience, like Pamela, on the small town upbringing, and it does teach a lot of great life lessons. My first job, I guess, was in high school when I turned 16. I went to work at Walmart. I was a cashier up front. I did get promoted to the gaming section in the back. I was able to, I think, sell licenses for fishing and hunting and everything else, but I did view it as a promotion. But that was probably my first paycheck, at 16. I also went to UNC Chapel Hill. This is where I met my wife at the School of Public Health. I did go into college thinking I was going to be a physician. My dad was a physician. We had physicians in the family, so that was a natural thing for me to do. Organic chemistry is what kicked my butt, so that didn't work out. I then thought I was going to be a lawyer, and for some reason that didn't work out either, and decided to apply into the School of Public Health at UNC. And they had more of a business administration, health policy administration track at UNC School of Public Health, which seemed to fit some of the criteria that I had. It was healthcare related, it was business related, and it worked out well. And that's actually where I met my wife, who's sitting here in the audience as well. So graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, and was really trying to figure out where to go next with the career. And there was this industry called investment banking, which I had no clue what it was at the time. And I did some research and found a job as a banking analyst. At the time, it was called First Union Bank, which was here in Charlotte. And I will say that there was one woman in the recruiting area at First Union at the time who gave me a shot, and she gave me some guidance on how to think about the role and the job. And I was a very atypical, I guess, candidate for that type of role. Most students kind of know they're going to go into banking a little bit early on in the college career, and taking classes and prepared for it. So she got me an interview, and the rest is history. I started out as an analyst there. So I was at First Union Wachovia Wells Fargo for about 25 years. And a couple of years ago, moved over to Bank of America, and I'm in the in the investment banking area, but I focus on healthcare companies. So for-profit healthcare companies, we work with businesses on merger and acquisition advisory work. We help them raise capital that's very specific to the healthcare industry.
So I think there's probably a life lesson in there. I'm not sure what it is, but maybe as we get toward the end of this and think about giving advice, the fact that you were not a business major. You know, she said she gave you some guidance, she gave you a shot. Now you're the managing director in the healthcare sector for investment banking with Bank of America. And I think there's something there for us to think about. When you follow your passion and you know, instead of trying to be something you're not, you can end up, you know, exactly where you are now, but you did it through, and I hear that so often, people that maybe have a little bit of a non-traditional or atypical path that can end up very happy and sort of at the top of their profession. So with that in mind, let me sort of come back to that, Amin, would you tell us a little bit about exactly what your role is now with Bank of America? And if there's such a thing as a typical day for you, or maybe if you think now that hopefully, knock on wood, we'll talk about COVID in a minute, we're getting on the side of that. I think your travel's picking up now. Could you tell us a little bit about, walk us through sort of when does your day start? When does it end? Just a typical day.
Sure. So, you know, what we do is very, well, it's all encompassing in that we work with companies all around the world. So, you know, it's global. So my day could start, you know, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning with conference calls. It could go late into the evening. There's really no predictable schedule necessarily. So, you know, the clients that we work with, and it's a very client-driven business. You know, what I would say pre-COVID, there was a lot of travel, you know, probably 2 to 3 days a week. Could be more depending, could be less, but, you know, probably average 3 days a week. I would travel anywhere, usually in the US, but always, you know, always made a point to make it to, you know, some of the European countries, you know, once a quarter or so. But our clients are all over the place. And so you're basically there for your clients. So, you know, where they are, what they need, you're in the client business, and we're focused on delivering for them. You know, it's what I would say is when you're helping companies, advising them on whether they want to sell or whether they want to buy some other companies, it's a lot of work. You know, we have great people that work with me who do a lot of the analysis, but you know, for me personally, it's about client advice. It's about industry expertise. It's about bringing, you know, ideas and such to the conversation, dialogue with the you know, the executives of the companies. And as a result, you know, not too dissimilar from being a physician, you have to be available at all times. And you know, the good news is I've got a very supportive family who reminds me that I'm, you know, on the phone a lot, but nevertheless, have been very supportive. And I think that's what you need in this type of industry if you're going to do this kind of job. Vacations are great, but you're usually, you know, working at some point during vacation. The weekends, there's usually some type of, you know, calls or something you have to do. But so there's never a quiet moment necessarily, but you know, I'm still striving to find some balance, you know, from that perspective. But I think it's also a nature of the job and the industry that you're in. So.
Let me ask you this, given that Wells Fargo headquartered in San Francisco, B of A's headquartered here in Charlotte, are your days ending any earlier now that you're headquartered in Charlotte, or does it not matter?
No, it really doesn't matter. In fact, you know, what I do at Bank of America, you know, headquarters are here, but most of the people that I work with in my line of business are actually in New York or San Francisco or Europe. So really, that really doesn't matter. It's really just a function of, you know, what's going on with that specific client that you're working with on any given day. So you could span any hour of the day.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And Pam, let me ask you the same question. And you guys, I'm really sort of with some fear and trembling asking this question, given being on the front line of the healthcare in the world we're living in right now. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your sort of primary responsibilities in your role, and then if there's such a thing as a typical day, either pre-COVID or now, what does that look like for you?
Sure. So I mentioned that I have the pleasure of leading our physician network. So my teams, we focus on the operations. So if you come into our clinics, what does it look like to make sure we deliver the compassionate, personalized care operations, keeping the lights on, all of the stuff, maybe even behind the scenes that you don't see. Our teams are committed to that and figuring out our strategy for what is the care that we need to evolve, grow, add programmatically. And I'd say increasingly, evolving and innovating in healthcare because the system is broken in so many ways, and we don't control all of it, but accepting what parts of the system we can impact and should impact to make sure we deliver the safest, highest quality care that provides value to our patients. And so we think about that day in, day out. There is not a typical day. I say, I told you I'm an OBGYN physician, and almost all of our physician leaders still provide some clinical care because it's important for us to stay grounded in what it's like to get back to our purpose. I mean, that's why I went into this, to help people, to really connect with people. And that I start my week. So I chose my Monday mornings to be my clinic days. I do not take call anymore, but I see my patients in the office on Monday mornings, and I tell people it's to ground me. I start my week focused on our patients in our clinics with my team, and that just gets my week off. People leave me alone. I mean, that's the time where they know I'm not answering their emails and don't call me unless it's an emergency, and it works. I can just focus on the patients. There is no typical day. I say pre-COVID, I did spend a lot more time on the road. I live in Winston-Salem. About probably almost 60% of our clinics are in the Charlotte area. Then we have clinics also at the coast. And so I would spend a lot more time driving to Charlotte, meeting with people, once or twice a week. I say I spend like a lot more time on Zoom these days, to collaborate. But that collaboration is with other executive team members on the work we're doing around health equity or communications or just the financial aspect of our operations. I spend a lot of time rounding. So I believe that it is important to connect with our teams and to have bi-directional conversation with them to really figure out what are we doing well, where do we have opportunities, and build that relationship. And so I make that something that all of our teams value, but I try to do it as much as I can. So sometimes I'll have an entire day where I spend it rounding with one of our leaders to go into our spaces, to talk to people, find out what's going well, and engaging with them. And then externally, I spend quite a bit of time talking to others who are either in healthcare, who we're partnering with in some way, to figure out, how do we do this together? Because we know that there are lots of things that we will never be able to do as a health system or as physicians alone. And so I spend quite a bit of my time doing that.
Okay. Let me ask this next question of you, sort of building off of that. As Dean Matthew mentioned, we have a very sort of signature focus on leadership development. So I want to ask the next two questions about leadership and resiliency, something that we've all been thinking a lot about over the last 18 months, resiliency. But let me start with leadership, Pam, and ask you for how do you think others would describe your style as a leader? So a two-part question. So how would you describe your style? And the second, did you have an early mentor or early influence, maybe a parent or a relative or someone else, that helped inform the style that you have today?
So I think others would say I'm collaborative, right? I think that my overall leadership style is relationship driven. I do believe that we get the best thoughts and we do the best when we have diverse opinions and people able and empowered to speak up. I often tell people I love the work you do, Will, and Will's work with my team. I want to build strong leaders who then I can set free to innovate, evolve, and do their work. I don't want to micromanage. I think I'm failing if I'm micromanaging and having to do those things. But at the same time, I think that it's important to have direction and clarity on what execution and results mean. I'm a continual improvement person, so I'm always thinking about what are we doing? How can we do something different, right? Not change for change's sake, but thinking about doing things better. And I instill in our teams a sense of not babysitting the work you have, but what is your job to grow it, to, help me not have to be the subject matter expert, because I rely on you to know what we should be doing and to do that. So that's a little bit of my approach, and it works well. It works well in the right settings, but I'll say that one of the things COVID really showed is I had to flex between styles of leadership. There's a time to sit around and debate and build consensus. And honestly, things were changing so rapidly in March of 2020 that there were times where it was a command center. Like, I need you to do this. And it was very much like, here's what we have to do. And so I think that I'm glad that I was able to flex in and out of various styles, even though my traditional style would be relationship driven. And I'll go back, I don't know that there was a single mentor in healthcare or business that influenced me, but I will say back to my upbringing, I believe a lot of my strength and my focus and the way that I relate to people and lead comes from the sense of community that I developed through my family. My grandmother, we just lost her. She was 99 years, 10 months, so she was just almost 100. But as a matriarch of the family, very strong, but very much selfless and about this community. And it was that we do well together, but if we leave anyone behind, then we don't succeed. It's that sense. And so I feel that she was a strong leader in the community, respected, and has a legacy that's not about titles or degrees, but is probably more powerful, I think, and has had more impact than I think some people do now. We check the boxes and do all those things. And so I'd say that's probably one of the biggest influences for me.
Yeah. My great grandpa Kelly was a tobacco farmer in Oconee County in South Carolina. And I didn't know that about your family, so I just wonder about some of the similarities there, because I think that there's a very unique style. I think it comes out of that sort of approach, which is if you don't do it, it doesn't get done, and it's can be tough love kind of thing, but ultimately very supportive as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me ask you the same question. So how would and then we can ask Julie here to verify your leadership style. How would others describe your style? And you referenced someone to give you a shot, but I'm curious if there was anyone, or maybe there's a person that had an influence on your style of leading others today.
Yeah, sure. And Will, I have to say, I had not met Pam before this evening, but you found two very interesting panel members here who are in healthcare, but in very different ways. So my leadership style is a little bit more of a micromanager. And that's something I continue to work on every day, but I would say most people, and I recognize it, I acknowledge it. I think people will say that I do tend to get in the weeds a lot. But look, I think it's a personal style. I think you clearly want to create a path, for your colleagues, and in particular in my line of business, the younger, bankers who are coming in out of college or MBA school. You want to create a path where they feel like they're getting the best experience, and you sometimes do have to learn to let go and trust and give people the responsibilities that they deserve. But I think that takes time. I'm in this industry now for 27 years, and I'm still trying every day. But I would say that's probably one of the things that well, that's how I would describe my leadership style. I think from a mentor perspective, I just like Pam, I can't think of anyone specifically that I would identify as a mentor, but I do vividly remember when I was coming up the ranks within investment banking, senior people like myself today that did give me a shot, that were able to let go and let me kind of lead, a discussion, a meeting, or a conference call, whatever it may be. And you learn by, mistakes, and you get better at it, and you learn how to do it better the next time. So I think, there are many individuals, over the last 27 years that I can think of that were in a position to give me that chance, when I needed it. to be able to grow and do a better job, that role.
What do you think they saw in you to let you lead that conference call or even to give you the shot to begin with?
Yeah.
Because I think you have in my view, a very sincere, very understated, but intense way of very focused and dedicated and passionate about what you're doing. I'm curious, or maybe they told you, what did they see in you when they said, Amin's got this?
Yeah. Well, I think having initiative and just wanting it is the most important thing. I give some of the advice that I give, if I think about, the younger bankers within, Bank of America that I work with now, and that could be ages 22 through 35, whatever you pick the range, is don't be scared, to walk into, someone senior's office and discuss an idea that you have. It may be the worst idea ever, but, those are the individuals that you remember, when I'm sitting, in my seat and I have someone who either calls me, these days it's more calling or having a Zoom, but, and says, hey, what do you think about this? I thought about this idea. Here are the 3 reasons why I think it makes sense. What do you think? Whether it's a great idea or not, it really doesn't matter to me. I just have much more respect. I think it's experiences like that. I do think that, unfortunately, a lot of people these days have a tendency of being a little bit more sheltered, not coming out and having those types of conversations with their senior leaders, and taking a little bit of risk. But those are the ones that I remember, and I think that's how I approached it, which is probably what gave the confidence to the senior people that I worked with at the time.
Excellent.
If I can, maybe when you said that, so I remember when you talked about that micromanagement, I've been on a journey because I did a leadership program, I remember several years ago, and one of the things that they ask you to do is think about those messages you've heard over your life and how you may have overcooked them a little bit. And one of mine was, if you want it done right, you do it yourself, right? And that was like, something we said. And so they literally, I was challenged to say intentionally to my team for the next few weeks, I trust you to, like very implicitly, I trust you to. And so I say we're all in therapy as leaders, we're always a journey and you never stop learning and triggering. But I think the part for me is figuring out when, because my chief operating officer will tell me you're in the weeds. And I was like, okay, I recognize it. And now I have my trigger and I can move forward. So I'd say we're all on a journey.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. And I think the other piece to that is what happens when your team does make a mistake. Right. And, it's very easy to kind of go back to like, I should have done it myself. Right. And so part of, I guess, maturing in my industry in particular is knowing how to give that kind of feedback. Right. Because, I'm sure if anyone knows anything about investment banking, there's, great stories, years ago where, you think about firms on Wall Street and how bankers would act and, the behaviors and everything else. And it's very easy to have that type of harsh, that harsh approach, in particular with younger bankers when they make mistakes. And I think, we're in an environment now where you can't do that, right? You can't open your door and just yell out the door and chastise someone for making a mistake or saying something they shouldn't have or doing something they shouldn't have. So you have to take a very different approach to it. And, so I think that takes time to learn, and it's a skill set that you have to learn as well. And how do you communicate, with your team members when they don't do it right and when they don't do it to your standards. So again, it is an evolution. And I'm sure I'll probably continue to evolve until the day I retire. But,
It's the Yoda principle. You must unlearn what you have learned. So I love that, like consciously stating, this sort of thing. I trust you to do it. And I had that one drilled into me too. If you want something done right, do it yourself. So let me, I've got some questions about COVID, but before we move into that, maybe one more leadership question. And Pam, if I can, I'll start with you on this. This has to do with resiliency. So the one thing that we do think, there's certain things about leadership that you can't teach. Some of it's trait, some of it's, DNA and innate. But there are some things around resiliency that can be developed and learned, and setbacks and obstacles are something that every single one of us face. So how do we, resiliency is not avoiding the sack, as I like to say, it's once you've been sacked, how do you get up, dust yourself off, and get going again? So I'd like to ask each of you a question about, related to resiliency. Pam, if I can, I'll start with you. Could you share with us a time when you had a setback or an obstacle or disappointment, something didn't go the way that you wanted? What was it? What happened? And maybe more importantly, what did you learn, maybe about yourself or about the world, or just something that still to this day has informed the way you deal with setbacks and disappointments?
So I'd say that, COVID, the pandemic itself has been interesting, there's been some silver linings for it, but I think from a leadership perspective, it's been a interesting setback from where the journey we thought we were on, right? I've been in this role for 3 years, and 18 months of it has been a pandemic. And so we had, in 2019 for us was there was a lot going on within our organization and within our medical group, and we were so looking forward to 2020. And I kept telling people, when 2020 comes, it was like the fun stuff. We're going to get back to all the great stuff, the plans, best laid plans. And then the pandemic hit. And it has been, there have been so many things that were taken from COVID that we learned, and we are embracing a new way of doing things. So I don't want to, disregard that. But I will say it was a little bit of it took us off track, right? And it also has been a challenge for my teams. I'm very much hey, look, we can build each other up and we got this. And it has been hard over times for my teams to keep putting teams on their backs to get over the finish line, to just keep going another day, ups and downs. And so in that sense, it's been a setback of, wasn't what we thought the last 18 months were going to be. But we always look for what are those things we can take away from it that we should embrace. So it's our digital health. It's what do we expand it there? What have we learned about ourselves? One thing that I'll say we realize is when we're all focused on one thing, that's both as a organization and I think as a country in the world, which was ending this pandemic. Look what amazing things we could do together, right? And so that was the key to us. We kind of look back and we actually profile what did we accomplish, how do we do it, and what do we want to learn from this. And it was that when we are crystal clear on what our objective is and we all are aligned, lockstep with it, is pretty powerful what we can do.
Thank you. Amit, let me ask you the same question. What about an obstacle or disappointment or setback? And what did you take from that or learn from that experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So I think, generally speaking, and it's not necessarily me specifically, but in my industry, the biggest setback, at least for people in my generation in banking, was, the financial crisis. So if you think about, 08, 09, a lot of changes, obviously. And, at the time, I saw a lot of colleagues either, quit and leave to go somewhere else or get out of the industry, or many, were laid off, right? So that was probably the setback. And, there was a point where, at least in my specific group at the time, it was me and my boss, left. And, I think that could have been a very, that could have been a point where I would have made a move myself, but I stuck with it and was able to ride out the next, 12, 18 months. And it ended up being a very interesting time in banking, and it was actually a boom. If anyone follows the stock market, following that, we've been on a big run since then. So I think, I would say generally speaking, that was a big setback. But, what I learned, from that was be patient. Don't make any, decisions, too fast. Think about it twice, 3 times, and stay committed to it. And that happened to work out well for me at the time, and something's worked out. I think the other thing, just on a daily basis, as far as disappointments or setbacks in my job, we are in the transaction business. We're chasing deals every day, and you lose more than you win, and you have to learn every day how to deal with that. But it's also interesting to see where some of the best relationships you think you have don't always, those decisions and transactions don't always go your way. I think what we've realized, at least I've realized in my industry, is that, there's a lot of factors that go into making decisions to work with a particular bank on something, right? Sometimes it's not just the CEO. They have a board of directors that, has influence on making decisions. They might have, someone else on the management team who has has someone better that they'd like to bring in and introduce into the mix. And so I think it's very easy in situations like that to lose trust in people. But I think what I've learned and still trying to learn every day is that you can't take it personally, and you do the best you can. And the best thing you can do is move on. If you sit there and dwell on it, it just slows you down. But that only comes with time and experience. But those are, what I would say, real daily setbacks and disappointments, in my job.
Yeah, thank you. But it's really interesting to hear you say that, because you think of investment banking, Bank of America, and to hear you say, we lose more than we win, and you lose a lot every day, and you just got to keep moving forward. I think that's great perspective for all of us.
Yeah.
To keep in mind. So let me ask a couple of questions about COVID, and then we're going to open it up for audience Q&A. We'll have some time left for that, and we do have a hard prompt stop at 6:30. Again, the reception will follow upstairs immediately. And Pam, if I can, I'll start with you on this first question about COVID. And we've already touched on it a little bit, but I'm really wanting from your perspective on the front line of healthcare provider, but also as a leader, a senior leader and president within Novant Healthcare. How would you describe the last 18 to 24 months? And then as a nation, what do you think we should learn from this experience? Because we know that there will be something else around the corner. It may not be a pandemic, but something else. I'd love to hear your perspective about how would you describe the COVID pandemic, and what do you think we've learned collectively?
So it's been pretty traumatic, I think, in lots of ways, ups and downs, challenging for our teams. From a physician perspective, I think there have been lots of parts of COVID that have been scary. In March of 2020, we really didn't know what we were up against, right? What does this look like? We didn't know if we had the right equipment. It was scary having conversations around what if we don't have enough ventilators, or what do we do if we run out of masks? It was something we never thought we would be talking about in the United States, with just seems like infinite resources, right? And then I think, there was a period of time where, so I say there's so many ups and downs. There was a period of time where everyone rallied together. The communities rallied around. You saw the healthcare heroes. We had the police driving through the hospitals, lifting up our teams, and everyone's just waiting. Yes, we can get through this. So much hope with finally, there's a vaccine. And then this year challenging because we hit that wall where all of a sudden it felt like, whoa, wait a minute, are we going to get through this? And it all goes back. What I think we learned, and Amit just said this, is the importance of trust. So when we were educating communities around COVID, there's a lot of distrust that we really came to embrace as something we have to overcome to achieve equity and have outcomes in our communities, is building trust with traditionally underserved communities. When the vaccine was developed, a lot of trust issues and what that meant. Even now, I feel like as a society, lots of issues around trust that I think we have to really, really work hard on to rebuild back our society to a point that I think we maybe didn't realize some of the underpinnings had been compromised, right? So to me, I think what we've taken away from this is that we are committed to, and we need to rebuild trust within teams, between physicians and patients, or physicians and communities, between science and communities, and just as human beings, and the power of being able to have civil discourse where we can truly think through and be the scholars I think that some of us, want to be, and embrace different opinions. So that's what I really want to make sure that we don't lose sight of, is that we as we move out of this, that we seek to really see each other and build trust within community.
Excellent, thank you. Listening to that made me think of There was a historian who talked about some of the differences between Western and Eastern culture, and he said that Eastern culture was much more adept at sort of incremental, consistent improvement, whereas Western culture, especially the U.S., wasn't really that focused or disciplined. But when you needed a silver bullet, like the vaccine, and when you needed something, or the atom bomb in the war, whatever it was, or the iPhone or Apple, that we had these incredible breakthroughs, but we're not really always great at that incremental, steady, consistent. So I think, to your point about the trust aspect, rebuilding some of those foundational underpinnings is going to be critical to move forward, because we don't know what the next threat is going to be, but we know it's coming. Thank you, Pam. Omid, let me ask you the same question. So, from your perspective, from a financial perspective, investment banking, how would you describe the last 18 to 24 months, and what do you think, as a nation, that we've learned from this, or should learn from it?
Yeah. So I would say at the beginning of the pandemic, things were very slow for me from a work perspective. There's a lot of uncertainty in our industry, just given where the markets were. And, my line of business is very much driven by the stock market. So, the way, the markets behave, drives, everything else that we do in our business. I was taking a lot more walks around the neighborhood, Will.
I noticed that.
Yeah. And so that probably lasted about 3 or 4 months. I would say, ever since then, I've probably had the busiest 18 months of my career ever. And it's a function of being at your desk 24/7, having Zoom calls back to back, and we're just getting much more done. It's not sustainable, I can tell you that. But, as an industry, we've been much more productive in the last 18 months than ever. And that's really demonstrated and shown in just transaction activity and the amount of capital that's been raised in the markets. So there's just, people have just much more access to that. I think that the challenge that we face as an industry is, the economy, as we look at it from a banking perspective, has obviously picked up significantly, but there's still a disparity between what we're seeing, on Main Street. And so we always have to find that right balance. I think as any institution, banking institution, you always have to find that right balance so that you have the right approach, to community and how you're serving the community at the same time, watching the markets improve the way they have and profits improve the way they have. So, I think that's one of the things that in our industry in general, many of the banks and firms are, struggling with every day, but I think everyone's trying to do the best they can to bring some of that balance. I think as far as, what we've learned in the future, I think healthcare is a bright spot in our economy in general. I think if anyone has any interest in getting into healthcare, there's a lot that's going to happen over the next couple of decades. I think if we've learned anything, is how important innovation is, how important technology is. And I think if you rewind the clock, just a few years ago, there was a lot of rhetoric in the market and in the public as far as pharmaceutical companies and drug pricing, and they were always the bad guys. Fast forward, it's the pharmaceutical industry that's created all of these therapeutics and vaccines. And so I think there will always be, that sentiment out there, but I do think that, the public in general has probably, has a much better appreciation for what the industry and healthcare industry can do. So I think investing in healthcare is a great thing to do. I think getting into the healthcare field, whether it's on the provider side, whether it's, helping healthcare companies raise capital so that they can provide the care, create the vaccines, create the drugs. I just think that there's going to be so much innovation in the industry that you really can't lose by taking the healthcare industry as a career path.
Thank you. Let me ask you a follow-up to that, because since really December of 19, there's been this sort of trepidation that the market's going to come back, the market's going to reset. We're going to have the housing market's going to slow down. Things are going to cool down, and it hasn't.
Right.
From your seat, from your perspective, you talked a little bit about finding the balance between Wall Street and Main Street. If you looked into a crystal ball, what do you see?
Yeah. And this is not a Bank of America point of view, so this is no me point of view, but, you know, I would say that, you know, if anyone's followed what's happened in the last 12 to 18 months, there has been a significant amount of, you know, liquidity that's gone into our market. And when you have that kind of capital, you know, the government pumping that kind of capital into our economy, you know, by definition, I think you're going to see a prolonged period of, you know, prosperity from that perspective. Again, you know, we'll try to separate, you know, what's happening on Main Street and what's happening on Wall Street. But I think there's just so much capital that's in the marketplace, and, you know, that translates to, you know, home prices. It translates to everything, you know, that we do. So I think that we're probably going to be in this kind of environment for another few years, is my personal opinion. And, you know, we're always going to have to deal with certain things as it relates to inflation or whatever happens on the geopolitical level. But it's really hard to deny, you know, the capital infusion that's gone into this country, into our economy, and what that implies for growth.
Thank you. So Pam, let me ask you this question about sort of looking into your healthcare crystal ball, and after this we'll open it up to audience Q&A. But if you were looking into the future, again, from a healthcare provider perspective, but also as the senior leader in Navon, what do you see in our future? And I think I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about, you know, are we finally on the other side? What's your take?
I wish I had a crystal ball. I do think, you know, a lot of positive things related to increasing vaccination rates. Actually, treatment options. You know, what made the COVID different was we did not have a way initially to even mitigate like the loss, right? So if we can treat people more easily, detect it, have testing, all those things are there. I do believe we're going to be on the other side. And so 2022 is our year to hopefully unmask and really get there at some point, right? I think a lot of people are saying that it's just a matter of when in 2022. I think that the word in healthcare for the future, and I know that people overuse it, but it is innovation, right? Whether it's forced because there are people who are saying, hey, look, why don't you do this differently? There's a lot of that, and we embrace that. I mean, we realize that we have a traditional way of delivering healthcare that hasn't really been reevaluated or evolved for what people expect. One, the digital age, you know, just the way that we live and work. And it's going to be about relationships and partnerships. There are lots of people who've gotten into the healthcare space and realized it is not easy. It is complex, the regulations, the safety quality, the payment aspects of like, you know, it's easy to go after all of you insured patients, but then what about the communities that need care and who takes care of the community, right? And so it's going to be about partnerships and whole communities coming together to take care of each other.
I was just thinking, you've got to have a special sort of sense of, not pride, but satisfaction, just that, you know, you are in your community, you know, sort of where you are and leading, you know, healing the community. So you're a part of a community, but you're also on the front line of healing it and being so and read your bio, we can see, you know, the commitments you have with that community. That's got to be, I would think, gratifying with all the challenges of COVID. It's still got to be, especially a different level, I would think, of gratification.
I would say, but it's a blessing. Like, I don't think that everyone has the opportunity to be part of something where this, I would say, the sense of purpose and fulfillment that we have in healthcare when, you know, things are going well. It's not something everyone has. And so it is a blessing that's what gets us through our days. Our teams yesterday were out doing swabbing some vets for honor flights that they were about to embark on. And they said, it filled my cup. It was the most rewarding thing we did. We opened the vaccine sites, and I was there the first day, and there were like, you know, 80-year-old couples who were there and excited because they wanted to be there early because they're like, we haven't been out of our house, and this gives us hope, right? And it warms our hearts. I mean, that's why we get into, you know, healthcare is to help others. If we wanted to be super rich, we would have been investment bankers. But, you know, we know we serve our purpose, but it does, it gets us through the hard times.
Well, you're right about I remember when Aaron and I went and got our Johnson & Johnson vaccine shot. Thanks to you. We were and we went to the Haynes Mall. I mean, it was, and I'm raised Southern Baptist, and I said, this was like a revival. I mean, people that you didn't know were high-fiving and all that. And I was looking for the covered dish. I thought they should have bought the house. It was a lot of fun. All right, thank you both so much. Let's open it up for some audience Q&A. We do have a little bit of time for some questions, so let's see if yes, sir, back here in the back, Alfredo.
I know I don't have a microphone, but I know you talked a little bit about the complexity, right? Managing people through this time, trying to keep them engaged and connected. And I think we all have heard about mental issues like lately and burnout. I was curious how you guys have handled, you know, some of that in both different industries.
So let me repeat that for those that are live streaming. So the question was, given different industries, when we talk about leading and managing others, and there's been a tremendous mental and emotional strain and burnout, and we're hearing more and more about that. So from your relative perspectives, how do you all try to manage that?
Well, I'll say, you know, we really emphasize supporting each other. So amongst our leadership teams, whether it's a peer support, like check on each other, you know, we really emphasize that. There were times I swear in March, I think it felt like I was on call because it was, you know, sun up, sun down, every day, 7 days a week. I mean, there was probably a month where I don't think our team took a day like without spending hours and hours together because we were trying to figure out what to do to make care safe. And it was exhausting. And we knew we could do it short term, but we could not sustain that. And so after we got through that period, we really started checking on each other saying, you have to take vacation. You know, I need you to take a day off. Let's divide and conquer. Because it was like, what can we do to fill our cups? And we also try to spread that, like, what are the fun things that we can do that kind of help reinvigorate us? We focus a lot, like, you know, obviously we deliver, mental health care to our communities, and we tapped into that and set up ways for our teams or our physicians to have a easy button to get care where they needed it. And because we have such a amazing team, you know, we did moments where we checked in with people or did Zooms. People could pop in and be part of this thriving together, where we kind of like said, come. It could be a prayer, it could be just a meditation, but something where people felt like they were part of a greater community. And we're still working on it because there are parts of our teams where they've seen loss beyond what most people ever imagined. And so we're trying to figure out how to make sure we truly are personalizing their needs compared to those, you know, who are just tired and burnt out and struggling in some way.
Yeah, for us, it's similar in our industry. We've been, we've all been doing better job at is really communicating, you know, with our colleagues, in particular those that are, younger and just, again, they're not sitting in an office right now. They're working 12, 15-hour days in their apartment and having check-in calls 3 times a week. We are, being a bit more focused on kind of forced, days off during the week where you can't, ask an analyst or associate to do anything. So forced to take those days off. So I think what we realize is just having more communication, checking in, calling them up, just talking about whatever, and trying to provide that human touch, over the phone or on Zoom.
That's a great question, Alfredo. Thank you for that. We are just about out of time, and I have a hard stop at 6:30. I've made a commitment to the faculty here who have class. So what I'd like to do, if you've got a question and we didn't get to it, and I'm sure that's the case, you're going to be able to stay with us for a little bit, I think, upstairs at the reception. I don't know how long you'll be here, but if you have a question, please feel free to ask Dr. Oliver or me once we get upstairs. And I would ask you, though, just as a little bit of housekeeping, when we say good night from here, if you have a question, please hold that until you get upstairs, because we can't get up if there's a convergence coming down. So we ask for you to please exit up, and we'll see you there. But I did want to ask you all for one last question, and it's the advice. It could be on any career, life, anything at all that is something that has helped you or something that you share often, we would love to have that. So you've got a captive audience. Pam, if I can, I'll start with you. Is there any advice that you would share with this audience?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. I'd say one, like I mentioned before about finding that purpose is important. Like, I mean, jobs are important. We all want to get paid, but I would say like chase happiness, right? Redefine what it means to be happy wherever you are and assess, constantly check in on that. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to pivot. And I think Omid, like earlier, pointed out, like he thought he was going to be a physician, then he got his right mind and said maybe law school. Then he got his right mind and said no, right? But don't be afraid to pivot because it's never too late to adjust and change if something's not working for you. And do everything you can to keep your options open. And just that constant check-in on yourself is really important. And because I'm such a big, believer in the community, build that community, right? So you always have someone that is looking out for you and has your best interest at heart.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with Pam on change is a good thing. You don't want to do it every day, at least in your career, but I think we all need to be invigorated, throughout our career, and don't be afraid of change. I think it's a great thing. The other thing, is just be optimistic. I have a tendency of sometimes just getting too, just down in the weeds and too worried about things. And my wife has always been a great, the best advice she's always given me is just be optimistic about, the future, be optimistic about where you are today. And things will work out, it'll come and go, and tomorrow's a new day. And it's worked out for me in the business for sure.
Terrific. Thank you both. Please join me and thank you. On behalf of Dean Matthew and the McColl School, we have a small token of our appreciation. So I want to share this, and please feel free to exit, and we will see you upstairs. Thank you.